We got another day of NBA action. And with FanDuel, every night is a watch party. So it's time for your FanDuel crew to make their bets. So, what's the move tonight, gang? You know that new customers who bet $5 get $200 back in bonus bets if you win. Woohoo! We're heating up, fam. Bet all the stars with all your friends and make every moment more only on FanDuel. New customers bet $5, get $200 back in bonus bets if you win. Make every moment more with FanDuel.
It goes down in the DM. It go down in the DM.
21 plus and present in Iowa. First online real money wager only. $10 first deposit required. Bonus issued is non-withdrawable bonus bets that expire 7 days after receipt. See full terms at FanDuel.com/sportsbook. Gambling problem? Call 1-800-BETS-OFF.
This episode is brought to you by J.Crew. This spring, J.Crew is telling a linen love story. From perfectly rumpled beach cover-ups and effortlessly sexy suiting to button-up shirts from the world-famous Baird McNutt Mill in Ireland, the new J.Crew collection is made to be shared, lived in, and loved for decades and generations to come. Shop linen like you've never seen it, and more new arrivals for spring 2024 at jcrew.com.
10 years from today, Lisa Schneider will trade in her office job to become the leader of a pack of dogs. As the owner of her own dog rescue, that is. A second act made possible by the reskilling courses Lisa's taking now with AARP to help make sure her income lives as long as she does. And she can finally run with the big dogs. And the small dogs, who just think they're big dogs. That's why the younger you are, the more you need AARP. Learn more at aarp.org/skills.
British cyclists have won more medals at the last 3 Olympics than any other sport in Team GB. The Paralympics has been dominated by the Brits as well. The success has been driven by some famous moments on the velodrome track, from Sir Chris Hoy to Laura Kenny and Kadina Cox. But as we head into another Games, can the Brits beat the rest again? I'm Michael.
And I'm John, and this is Great British Bosses, where we speak to the men and women behind the scenes of sport in this country, the ones making the decisions and picking the teams. In this episode, we get down and into the detail with someone whose job is to do just that too. And will he settle an argument after we dubbed British cycling the medal factory on our last visit to Manchester?
My name is Stephen Park. I'm the Performance Director for the Great Britain Cycling Team at British Cycling.
In a high-performing organisation where you've got a big leadership role, the perception would be that you are bulletproof. But this has been an extraordinary time for ordinary people. So how are you? You okay?
Yeah, not bad, thank you. You're right. It has had its challenges. I think when we set off into, lockdown 1 a year ago, we were all wondering whether it was going to last all the way to the summer. And here we are 12 months on with on and off. And I think with the postponement of the Olympics and the Paralympics, while that was quite good to get that initial confirmation and clarity for the athletes, there still was, we look forward to Tokyo. Everyone's still hoping that we're going to get there in the end. But of course, there's a bit of uncertainty. So it's made it challenging. It's made it challenging for our group as a whole. On a personal level, I'm kind of really fortunate because, we do actually have a really good, tight team, and certainly around me, the senior leadership team we have in Great Britain Cycling Team have actually pulled together really well over this pandemic. It has resulted in them working harder and longer and days starting earlier. But they've certainly been working hard to actually try and support each other as well. So, when you're sitting at home day after day, looking at the screen on whether it's Zoom or Teams calls or whatever, I think we're all pretty keen to get it back to competition as quickly as we possibly can. I think we all miss that competition and meeting friends and out on the circuit.
What's been the biggest challenge for you and your colleagues?
Probably just sort of maintaining that environment and focus, I suspect, is probably the biggest single piece. I mean, we've clearly had some challenges more practically around the actual events that are taking place, events cancellation, the challenges of attending events, who can attend events. We've had that very recently, right up until a few days before, about who can actually go and who can't go, and whether you can get there or whether you can't get there. Managing as best we can the government's return to training guidance and trying to work closely with the DCMS, recognising the challenges they have in terms of trying to support elite sport, but equally recognising their social agenda and being conscious of the challenges that the country as a whole faces. And of course, early on, sort of making sure we could still access and have continuity of training, and the changes that that's brought, both whether that's training indoors, which for us is velodrome and BMX activity, or indeed whether it's outdoors of the winter, primarily road racing activity, which of course at this time of year in the main would have been warm weather training over the last couple of months, where the majority of our people have had to fit their mud guards, get some extra layers of warm weather clothing on, and get out there into the Peak District and get on with it.
Is there anything that's been beneficial, Stephen, that we'll carry on doing that?
Certainly, there have been, for sure, a number of lessons learned by riders and by coaches. I think that there's been some very specific individual beneficial pieces where we've had some athletes that perhaps were having some challenges along the road. So just in the big first half of last year, for example, Laura Kelly was struggling with a couple of falls, one after the other, in some of the track World Cups, and having to recover from injury. And there was a bit of a race against time to kind of be back fit for a Summer Games. So if you take that as a very specific example, the opportunity for her to then have a proper full recovery, not have the pressure of having to race, make sure she was recovered, get back into training, get herself into a place where now she's really on form again, and looking forward. So on that level individually, it's been beneficial. I think there's the challenges of when to train and when to race, and how to balance that. There's more you always learn around that, but that's balanced with the challenges of having to race to actually qualify enough qualification points for the various events that you might want to go to, primarily of course around the Olympics, and that itself has produced some challenges for us, because as we look forward towards the games, some of the qualification processes are still ongoing. But indeed, some of the qualification events are still being cancelled. And of course, there have been some athletes in different parts of the world who have been able to continue attending some of the events that allow them to qualify points towards their individual ranking, towards Olympic ranking, where British riders have been prevented from doing that because of the lockdown rules that we have here. That's just how it is, and we're obviously working with our international federation, the UCI, to try and make sure we try and mitigate as best we can, but we have to just be realistic about it and recognise that's the circumstance we're in.
And there has been a few kind of high-profile Paralympic athletes who decided that actually they're going to stop and actually retire in the last year. They would have gone to Tokyo, but didn't want to carry that on. That's
right. So just as we've said, for some individuals like Laura, it came quite timely. As it happens, I think she would have got back for the games as it happens in her case. But I just say on the other side, Sophie Thornhill, who's our reigning Paralympic champion, she was again doing particularly well, world champion, the run into the Paralympics. But just that extra year was another year too far. She was looking to move on from her Paralympic experience after a Tokyo 2020 Games, have a change of career, and she just felt she'd been at it long enough, and she needed to kind of crack on with the next step of her life. And so, unfortunate for us, nice that she's been able to go out on a high, if you like, at that point. But disappointing in terms of Games performance. Now, of course, we're working hard to have her replacement come up to speed as quickly as possible to fit into that slot, and hopefully we'll still be there in the running in that particular event in the tandem when we get to the velodrome in the Paralympics with Helen Scott, her pilot, so who's been working hard in terms of bringing on new riders over this last few months.
I'm interested in your role, Stephen, at British Cycling. We've got track cycling, we've got road cycling, mountain biking, we've got the para program, we've got BMX freestyle coming into the games.
Yeah.
How do you find the time to keep across all of that at the level of detail that you need to as the performance director?
Bluntly, you don't. I mean, it's you're trying to do your best, but bluntly, it's pretty much impossible because of the breadth. I mean, we obviously are working very hard to try and empower all of our coaches to take the lead in each of those different disciplines. We do have program managers that are then looking after whether it's a Paralympic program or a podium program or a pathway program, and regular dialogue with those, if you like, my kind of key reports in that regard. And of course, just regular check-ins, discipline by discipline. As it happens today, I was speaking to a number of the different coaches, keeping up on what they're up to, and by each of those disciplines at the at the sort of Olympic and Paralympic level, we do have a review which we run every month for each of those different disciplines to look at the progress they're making against their targets and against the direction of travel, how they're doing against their if you like, the trajectory towards where they think they'll be come games time, but also some of the short-term measures that they've got in place, the activity they've got in place, what they've just completed, what they're just doing, what challenges they've got, where they need some support, where they need us just to keep out the way, as it were, and to try and make sure there's nothing in the way. So we do that every month for each of those different disciplines, and then keep up to date with all the different reports in the meantime. So it keeps us all very busy, but we try to make sure that they all feel empowered to lead on their own individual disciplines as well.
And as we sit here in mid-March with an Olympics in mid-July into August and then the Paralympics to follow, without obviously naming names, but do you know the makeup of your Olympic and Paralympic teams across all those disciplines at this point?
Well, we haven't actually got to the point of selection meetings. They'll come later in the year, in a couple of months' time. But I think that the majority of the athletes and the majority of the disciplines know, they know the key athletes are in their discipline. They know whether they're in the running or whether they're not in the running or whether they're fighting out for a place. I suspect that if you asked all of our podium athletes and all of our podium staff, I suppose they'd probably, if you ask them now, they'd probably name 80% of the team today, I suspect, if we look back on it. And that's not because they don't necessarily have a view about who the other 20% are, but there's some places where people are still fighting out for those slots. And in some of the disciplines, we have a number of riders, any of whom could move in. So, our women's endurance discipline, for example, we have a whole host of very talented female riders in that program. We can only take a certain number of them to the games, and some will miss out. But they'll miss out because others are better. They won't miss out because they're not actually of the ability to go and win medals themselves. And that, of course, is one of the challenges, because some of them will be sitting at home watching the games, and they'll know that if they had been picked for that team, that they almost certainly would be in the same position, and hopefully that position will be standing on the top of the podium.
How much pressure is there, Stephen, to maintain the success of British cycling? Beijing, London, Rio. You arrived in 2017 after Rio from British Sailing, which was very successful under you as well. But how much pressure is there on you?
I think there's quite a lot of pressure on everybody that's involved in our program, but the pressure mainly comes from ourselves. Everybody within the team is desperate to go out and carry on that success, carry on and create the legacy, if you like, that the Great Britain cycling team has created, and that's a standard for being the top nation in cycling. I think that everyone's also realistic that the game moves on. The number of events that we will be able to dominate in will be fewer. The amount of competition we have internationally has definitely increased. The margins between winning a medal, winning the event, winning the gold medal and finishing fourth are smaller than ever before. And some of the, if you like, the low-hanging fruit that we were able to exploit in some of those earlier games has been eaten up by much of our competition. So I don't think that we're going into the games expecting that we're going to have a replica of past games. Equally, I recognise that was exactly the view in the run into Rio as well. So hopefully we'll have the same outcome. But yeah, for sure, it's far more competitive, and we're seeing that. But the good thing is that we are competitive in the majority of events. And we've also got a really good programme of activity moving towards Paris in 2024, which actually increases our competitiveness, particularly in events that perhaps we haven't been as competitive in the past. So on track, our women's sprint, for example, who won a medal at the Europeans earlier, or just at the tail end of last year, they haven't qualified women's sprint for the Tokyo Games, so that's in the run into Paris. But we haven't seen women's team sprint, representing Great Britain for some time. So it'll be great to see them back, and I'm very confident they will continue that progress all the way through to Paris. So we're working hard for Paris and as well as for Tokyo to try and make sure we've got that continuity. And I'm very certain we'll be there or thereabouts. But you can rest assured that everyone will feel the pressure of that expectation, of that weight, if you like, of representing the country when they get there. But that's it's that pressure and that expectation that's what defines winners and losers, isn't it? The opportunity to deliver on a given day is what defines an Olympic champion from somebody who wins at any of the other international events that we race at through the 4-year cycle, or 5-year cycle as it is this time.
And Michael mentioned it earlier about all the different cycling events. I think if you say to most people about the Olympics and British cycling, they'll think of the track team, as you mentioned, some of the events there. But obviously, the road race as well, potentially. But actually, BMX freestyle coming in. We spoke to Declan Brooks this week, and we've got a qualification place there. Is there a way of actually what you're looking at is winning some extra medals in some of those events that maybe not as kind of in people's minds as the track team?
We're trying to diversify, if you like, our medal winning. So the opportunities and the gains that we made, particularly on track, particularly around the work done with aerodynamics and positioning, the rest of the world has caught up on all that. And you can see that, on the road. You'll have seen it today on the time trial in the Paris-Nice. You're watching that, and indeed through the variety of track events we've had. So we're trying to diversify into all of the other Olympic disciplines. We also think that that's actually appropriate for the alignment of the world-class program to the social agenda, because we have a lot of people in this country who are riding mountain bikes, riding BMX bikes, people in inner cities on freestyle, which is a new Olympic event for us. And we want to try and showcase and provide role models and inspire the nation, inspire kids to get out in all of those different disciplines, not just think that Great Britain only races on track. Now, track still provides us with the lion's share of the medal opportunities. So, for sure, we're not trying to let anything go in track. We're absolutely still focused heavily on track. But we've had some great performances, if you like, in some of those other disciplines, in freestyle, both men and women. You mentioned Declan, but also Charlotte Wellington has done well, world championship medalist. We've certainly, got high hopes for her qualifying and delivering well when she gets to Tokyo. On the BMX racing, we've got some great performances, including European champion with Kai White, and we're hoping that Beth Shaver and the women will be able to come through and be fit for the games and move on. And we're still hoping that we get a qualification place in the mountain bike and the men. You'll have seen in the press recently Tom Pidcock talking about his aspirations to go and race at the Olympic Games. We still have to qualify a place. That's a challenge for us at the moment, particularly because, as I was saying, because of the events and whether they take place, and a lot of it we can't do anything about. But Tom is a rider who has been delivering well, won the won the under 23s at the World Championships just at the tail end of last year at a time that was actually faster over the same course as the elites. So, and then gone on through cyclocross. So he's and now in road racing is a still podium in a third of his disciplines in the last 6 months. So we'd obviously be optimistic about his chances too, if we can actually get him to the start line. And in the women's mountain bike, we've got some great riders there as well. So we're optimistic that we might even get 2 places if we can get the qualifications in the women's mountain bike. And we've got 2 or 3 riders in women's mountain bike who we believe have got the potential to be medal competitive. So yeah, I think we are trying to spread our efforts across all of the cycling disciplines. Hopefully that will serve us well in the long run. We think we've got a good chance of being competitive in Tokyo. For sure, that will improve our opportunity as we go towards Paris. So we're trying to play a little bit of a long game. And at the same time, hopefully we'll inspire the nation to take part in some of those other disciplines and for people to get out on their bikes at a time that is clearly important for everyone to maintain their health and their exercise.
Well, if, like me, you're a father and you've been trying to buy your children bikes over the past 6 months, you'll know, Stephen, that you've certainly been inspiring people to get out on their bikes in the last year or so. I've got a question specifically about BMX freestyle for you in a moment, but I just want to return to the theme of the track. And on the eve of the track program beginning in Rio, I went and met one of your colleagues, Ian Dyer, for a cup of tea and a little bit of a briefing about what to expect. And he told me that every member of that track team was capable and would probably win a medal. And that was not the perceived wisdom at the time outside of the sport, but that is what happened. Was Ian being supremely arrogant, or is that supremely good in the way that you set your cycling team up ahead of an Olympic Games where you need to peak?
I don't think Ian would have been being arrogant. I think it's good to hear that he was
confident.
It's good to hear that he was being confident, and hopefully he will be just as confident. I think for some of those events, it's easier to be more confident than others. So, for example, in the timed events, so the timed sprint events, the team pursuit, which everyone will remember, where you have 4 riders racing against each other. Those events, it's easier to be able to predict what your performance is going to be. Where it becomes a little bit harder is where you're doing the bunch racing events. So where you've got, for example, the Madison, 50 kilometers for the men, 200 laps of the track, almost certainly some crashing. It's a long event with a lot of riders on the track. So it's not just about your own performance, but it's also about the performance of others and the tactics you deploy on the day. So you don't just need to have the legs, you need to be able to have the brains to be able to deal with it right there, right then. And that becomes far harder. But I think that I'd like to think that when we get to Tokyo, that, if you happen to bump into Ian for a cup of tea, that he's certainly as confident in the majority of the events. There's still a little bit of water to go under the bridge. It's about pulling everything together at the right time. And as with any kind of really key athletic event, there's a big part about tapering at the right time. Interestingly, as somebody coming in from sailing into cycling, even though I knew how big a deal it was, I don't think I really had a full understanding of what impact it can have in those final days and that final performance. So hopefully that will all come together well, as it has done over recent games, and we'll be in a similar position. Certainly as we go into it, we're confident that we've got strong medal chances, but we are also realistic that there are other countries who are just as competitive. There's a lot of people who have worked with the British cycling team over the years who are now employed by other countries around the world as well. So some of that know-how has gone to those other countries. And of course, that's what makes competition the competition it is, and we'll get stuck into that and we'll race, and hopefully we'll win. And if we're not, we'll be gracious in defeat and we'll come back fighting next time.
And in terms of that track team, you've got the data, you've got the statistics, the analysis, but in something like BMX freestyle, which comes in, we simply don't know at the minute what a gold medal winning run in BMX freestyle is going to look like, because we've never had it before. So does that present a challenge then to you and your colleagues?
Yeah, it does. In both BMX events, they're also quite what I would say are high tariff events. If you look at the BMX freestyle, you don't actually know the course until you get there. If you're lucky, you might have had sight of the course maybe 2 or 3 weeks before you race on it. You've got a minute to deploy as many tricks as you possibly can in that minute. Now, if you think you can pull off a triple loop and land it, and nobody else can do that, if you can do it, at the end of your run, you pull it off and you win the gold medal. But equally, if you hit the ramp on the way down after you halfway through your run on the second on your double loop corkscrew, and you end up with your bottom on the track, then you're just not on the podium. You might be unlucky and find that you end up in hospital. And it's both for BMX freestyle and BMX racing, there is a high injury rate. And one of our challenges actually between now and the games in those events is about how hard we encourage the riders to push in training. Because when they push to pull off some of those tricks, or when they push to really go to right to the edge of the envelope, the risk of injury also increases. And if they get it wrong, then the risk is they get injured. And the risk of that is that they don't actually make the start line. So they are high tariff sports. But that said, we're trying to work hard to model what we can in the course, help the riders and their coaches pull together what the best run will look like. And of course, balance up what we believe the tricks are that on the freestyle that our riders can pull off and deploy effectively. And try and keep an eye on what the rest of the world are doing to judge whether or not we think that that's going to be competitive. But ultimately, you've got 1 minute, you have to get out there. Hopefully you come down in one piece, you get to the end of the run deployed successfully, and it's better than everyone else. But yeah, subjective judging, high tariff, difficult to forecast.
Well, we're certainly looking forward to that in Tokyo. Final one, Stephen, from us. How exciting is it actually to be involved in 2 Olympics in 3 years? Because we've got Tokyo coming up, and then with literally, by the time you're back, you're straight into Paris. Actually, being performance director of British cycling is actually a really exciting next couple of years.
Yes, that's super exciting. We hear people quite often, at the moment talking about challenges that, as we did here in this conversation, about, how we're all doing, how are you doing from a wellness perspective, mental health perspective. Of course, we've put a lot into our program in the background in that mental health strategy space. But right now, actually, people are talking about excitement about coming back after the Olympics. You then got the Paralympics. Then 5 weeks after the Paralympics, we're into the Track World Championships. We're into the World Championships for some of our other disciplines before we get to Christmas, and then hopefully after Christmas we're into the Paratrack Worlds, and then we're into Nations Cup events on track and qualification events for all our other non-track disciplines, running into Commonwealth Games, European Championship, World Championships. In the 12 months that follow, in the 12 months from the beginning of the games at the end of July until 12 months later into August in 2022, it's a hugely busy program. And by the time you get to that point, you've already started and you've already done probably 30% of the qualification for the Paris Olympic Games, which if it wasn't going to be in the UK, if it wasn't going to be a London or an Edinburgh type games, then Paris is pretty much as close as you can get to a home games. And with Tokyo looking like it's going to be very tough for spectators to attend, and the time shift going to be quite difficult, for sure Paris is going to be exciting. And with it being a games which obviously we all hope will be back to the Olympics and Paralympics that we would expect, then we would expect sellouts on tickets. We very much hope there'll be a huge British presence there, huge support for British performance. And working in partnership with UK Sport, with the British Olympic Association, British Paralympic Association, the English Institute of Sport. We are all of those organisations and ourselves working already on Paris and our Paris plans. It's difficult because we've got that overlapping with what we've got to do in Tokyo, and of course that's our first primary objective. But it is, to come back and think that you're straight into that is super exciting. And we've had conversations, just had one today with coaches, with some of our most experienced, most decorated athletes who you would think probably are ready just to think about whether they've time to hang up their cycling shoes. I say, no, I'm going to be ready for the World Championships. I'm going to be straight after the games. I'm going to come back, have a cup of tea and get straight on with it. I can't wait. It sounds fantastic. And so we're just working hard with our academy riders, because it's obviously an opportunity for our academy riders to sort of step up at the beginning of the cycle. And their job, of course, is to try and make it really hard for those returning athletes to get their places for the next cycle and not think that they're just, they can just roll on for another 4 years, that actually the level of competition is high. So we've got some exciting times within Great Britain Cycling Team. And the hardest bit we're going to have is actually picking the team for each of those different events, trying to give as many riders the opportunities that we want for them to show their potential. Because I can assure you, as they sit in each one of those disciplines, whether it's around the back of the van with the mountain bikes in the Peak District, or whether it's in the velodrome, around the timing screen, there is a lot of those athletes in the academy who are pretty desperate to displace our podium runners and really believe that they've got podium potential for Paris. So we're excited about Tokyo. It's going to run right on, and energy is high right through to Paris. So it's super exciting right now. Great time to be involved in Olympic and Paralympic sport.
Quick final one from me then, Stephen. Settle an argument for me. A year ago, I was at the National Cycling Centre, and Julie Harrington overheard me recording an intro which used the words medal factory, and she told me off about it. Last week, we were interviewing Chris Boardman. He couldn't stop using the words medal factory about the National Cycling Centre. Where do you sit on the debate, or would you prefer to answer that question in the autumn after the Olympics and Paralympics?
Yeah, I mean, I think that is it a medal factory? I'd like to think it's a performance factory, really. I suppose what we're trying to do is we're trying to create an environment in Manchester, but also where we run our other activities, not all the time in the National Cycling Centre, but we're trying to create an environment that allows us to provide the best possible support to allow athletes to realise the potential, and if you like, we create the platform, but ultimately they've got a springboard to success. It's the riders and their talent. They're the ones who've got to deliver at the end of the day. They've got to deliver literally on a day, and they don't get another chance next week. They get a chance in 3 or 5 or 4 normally years time. But I think that we'd like to think we've got a pretty good process of being a high performance environment that gives people the best opportunity. Whether that ultimately becomes a factory for medals, well, time will tell, won't it?
Thank you very much for your time today.
You're welcome.
Sports Social Podcast Network.
Hello, it is Ryan, and I was on a flight the other day playing one of my favorite social spin slot games on ChumbaCasino.com. I looked over at the person sitting next to me, and you know what they were doing? They were also playing Chumba Casino. Coincidence? I think not. Everybody's loving having fun with it. Chumba Casino is home to hundreds of casino-style games that you can play for free anytime, anywhere, even at 30,000 feet. So sign up now at ChumbaCasino.com to claim your free welcome bonus. That's ChumbaCasino.com and live the Chumba life.
No purchase necessary. VGW. Void where prohibited by law. See terms and conditions. 18+.